Hey folks, this is Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook, and welcome to the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit, where we're getting to connect with educators from all over the world that have amazing things to share with us in technology and pedagogy and inquiry and more. Come to think of it, I don't think we're totally all over the world, but we're pretty far flung, I think. And today we get to visit with somebody who I'm pretty excited to get to talk to, because he does something that has never really been a strength of mine. And that has to do with the student-led classroom. We're getting ready to talk to Paul Solarz, and he happens to be the author of this fabulous book called Learn Like a Pirate, where he talks about this particular thing. And so, Paul, I want to just turn it over to you real quick. Can you give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Paul Solarz. Like you said, I'm a fifth grade teacher in Arlington Heights, Illinois. I've been teaching all fifth grade for 18 years at the same school. It's in the same community I actually grew up in. Only went away to college in Minnesota, but came back to where I started. So I've been fortunate, and it's been such a great ride too. So I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. Very good. Very good. And so, I've noticed, teaching in my own classes and being involved with other classes and talking to other teachers, it's so easy for kids to get dependent on their teacher. And it's almost like, education's become this system where the kids are almost like a do whatever the teacher tells me mentality, where it's like we're just accepting the directives from the teacher. And to kind of kick this off, why do you think that we've gotten so like teacher dependent? Where has this all come from? What do you think really caused that?
I think it's just, first of all, thank you for having me on. I need to say that before I start. But I think that the main thing is we're naturally wanting to help kids learn, and our main goal is to be providers and be supporters. And we've learned everything about the importance of building background knowledge and making sure we give clear directions, and those things are all very important. But sometimes when we do all of that, we deprive them a little bit of the opportunity to fail while experiencing stuff. Now, I don't recommend that teachers just go out and say, all right, kids, here's what you need to do, now go. Sometimes that's good, but it doesn't work for everything. Building background knowledge is important. But I feel like we're just used to trying to provide as much scaffolding as we can so that everyone finds the highest success possible. And that is good for when it comes to content. We're going to probably learn our content best when we scaffold it the most. But what we don't always teach our kids that way is the process of learning, the act of learning. So I feel like, for me, I believe strongly that content is important, and I'll talk about that later. But I believe that the skills that kids learn, while learning the content actually is much more transferable and much more important in the long run. So I try very hard not to just, do everything for my kids. I try not to over scaffold or over prepare. Except certain things. I've worked, like I said, I've taught for 18 years as fifth grade. So certain things you have to over scaffold. And I think teachers know from experience there's certain things you just need to make sure that they get through. But other things I say, what, if I do a little less here, they're probably going to gain a lot more in terms of life skills that they're going to be able to transfer to other situations. So for me, it's a lot of finding that balance. And I think that comes a little bit with experience and knowing your kids and your grade level. And it is transferable. I see kindergarten teachers using this model, but it's at their level with their skills and their content. And I know high school teachers are doing it. So, it can be done anywhere, but you have to have the mindset of content is important to me, but I'm not going to just try to make straight A students out of everybody for my content. I want them to also experience the struggle of learning and the problem solving of figuring it out on their own and all those other little tidbits along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to totally echo that if I think back to my own time as a student, that some of the most important things that I got from school and got in my own personal learning were the lessons that I learned about learning or that I learned about life, as opposed to the specific content information. So much of that I think we end up forgetting. And, I think as I was listening to you talk about this, the other thing that I kind of think plays into this whole dependency on the teacher thing is just the idea of control with teachers, because we feel like we have to have control of things. We have to know how things are going to go. And having, some of that chaos and some of that instability is really hard for us. But sometimes that's something that we've got to either get comfortable with or get used to, or, take the risk of having that happen sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're so good at our jobs in certain ways that we over prepare, and the idea is, I don't want this lesson to fail, so I'm going to do everything in my power to prevent that. But sometimes what we don't give enough credit to is not a failed lesson, but a lesson that has ups and downs to it, where the kids have to come up with some solutions for you, and you might have to think on the fly a little bit. We kind of want to know in 10 minutes where we'll be, and in 20 minutes where we'll be, and what the kids will be doing, and really you kind of want to figure it out as you go a little bit. I think you want to leave a little up in the air. So I have a tendency to over prepare everything, but under deliver in the moment. Like, it's always there. I can always come back and I can always provide that information that I've prepared, but I'm not going to start with that. That might be something I might come back to, or I might think this is enough to get you going. Now go. If I need to, I'm going to interrupt you and backtrack a tiny bit. And I don't see that as a failure. I see that as a risk that you need to take, and you need to see how your kids do with it. Sometimes they're going to do great, sometimes they're going to do poorly, but either way, it's a good conversation that you can have with your students about the learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we've got all the answers figured out ahead of time, that's not nearly as much fun. I mean, there's, you got to have a little bit of spontaneity in there every once in a while.
There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I wondered, just to kind of kick this off a little bit, I wondered, at what point in your career did you start to really see the need for this, that students needed to have a little bit more direction and a little bit more control over the classroom? And I wondered if there was a particular experience or like a particular day that sticks out, or a certain year in your career, was there any sort of tipping point for you, and how did you realize that this was necessary?
Yeah, the way I think back to it, because it's really upon reflection that I even think about this, is, the way I was raised was a certain kind of a Montessori type style. My parents kind of let me explore on my own, make mistakes on my own. There was a lot of accidental breaking of things in the house because I played baseball, or, I'd climb on stuff or whatever. And there was never any danger. I don't think I've ever broken a bone in my life. But, the idea that I was allowed to explore and make mistakes on my own. My mom was always around as a young child, so she always knew what I was getting into and could help me if I needed it. But she let me do the things that I needed to do as a youngster. And then, through the school years, it was a lot of, I always attribute it to our generation of, I grew up with friends on the block, and we were always outside, and we were always at other people's houses, and we weren't necessarily with parents all the time, and we had to figure things out. And and nowadays I think a lot of kids are pretty much always around their parents or another set of parents, and it's not quite the same. I don't know if it's better or worse. I don't think I have an opinion on that. But I think the way I learned was this way of, you just kind of have to do it. Your mom wasn't going to do that for you. Your dad wasn't going to do that for you. So when I came to becoming a teacher, I had this idea. It actually was not a conscious thought, but this belief that I'm going to run the classroom and you're going to help me, and why should I just be the one who's constantly doing everything and you're just soaking it in and producing things for me? Why don't we work together as a team, become a family, and actually do this together? Here's the long list of things that needs to get done in a classroom. And as much of it as you can do is the greatest, you're going to help me out. So I've been trying since the beginning to put some back onto the kids, because I just knew they could do it. And I didn't have to. And it was probably out of a little, it's like a lazy thought, if I don't have to do it, that's going to free up time for me to do something else. But as the years went on, I realized, the kids can be doing nearly everything that I'm doing, to some degree. I'm going to probably plan out the lessons and plan out, the curriculum, because that's my expertise. But I'm going to have the kids doing all of the things like getting the computer card out and taking care of the classroom and managing materials and collaborating with each other to help each other when they're confused. I mean, some of these are the biggest things. I started out early in my career, just trying to use technology and going to the computer lab, and just knowing that could have been the most stressful time of the day, when we just needed to type a paper. At the very beginnings, when you'd use the computer lab once a week to type for writing, I remember all the technical glitches and how frustrating that was. And there was usually another person in the lab with me, but between myself and that person in the lab, we had to deal with 25, 28 kids and all their technical problems. And it just seemed like that whole hour was spent putting out fires. And at some point, I realized, why am I putting out every fire when the kids can be putting out fires for us? We can be, getting them involved too. So I think that was a real momentum shift for me when it all started kind of with the computer lab, and the fact that, we don't have a computer lab anymore. We have like computer carts, and some people are one-to-one. I'm not one-to-one. But my kids, they get the computer cart, they get the computers out, they help each other. As there's glitches, they ask each other first because they figure each of them have experienced it before, and they tackle the glitches themselves, and they come to me only as a last resort, which is really nice because I'm free to continue teaching to the entire group. Some kids may start to fall behind because they're working on technical glitches, but as soon as they're caught up with the technical glitch, they can look around and figure out what's going on and catch themselves up. And I feel like it feels like the classroom is this big corporation where we're all just, like a marketing department or something, and everybody's in cubicles, and we all just kind of stand up and, hey, I need that report, by 7 o'clock. We're all shouting to each other, and we're all communicating with each other, and it's just this different belief, and we're working on really respecting each other. So there's this family feel to it as well, and it's got a different feel than the classrooms that I grew up in as a student.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the technical glitches with the computers and everything, because I think when I started to realize how dependent my students were, there was sort of a light bulb moment for me one day when I was running all around the room trying to fix all of their computer problems. And then it started to dawn on me, and I'm going, what would they do if I wasn't here?
Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't depend on me for all of that stuff. And they're smart kids. And they work with technology, their phones or their own computers or whatever. They use them all the time. So they don't really need me. So why am I holding their hands through all of this? So I think I had a similar light bulb moment to you in that way.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's what it takes, though. It's this realization that we can get a lot more done if we stop making them wait for us to help them. Just empower them to lead each other, and you get so much more done that way. So, and that I've never looked back. I mean, to this day, it's just a lot of coaching. Don't ask for permission. Just get going on it. If I don't like what I see, I'm going to give you feedback, and you won't do that anymore. But you got to just go and use your gut, and I hope that your gut's going to tell you to do the right things. So.
Yeah, definitely. Now, as far as the overall picture of this idea of the student-led classroom, this is so much more than troubleshooting tech issues and emptying the pencil sharpener and getting the laptop card out and all of that. It goes a lot far, at least in your classroom, it goes a lot farther than that, right?
Oh yeah. It's hard to describe, just what it looks like. My big thing was, Dave had asked me to write the book, Learn Like a Pirate. And in my head, I kind of said, what am I going to write about? I'm a fifth grade teacher. I can write about how I teach, but in my mind, this wasn't that novel of an approach. It was, I didn't quite realize how different my room might look to some people. I didn't realize that. And I know that it's not different to a lot of people. A lot of people are doing exactly what I'm doing. But it is different to some. And when I started to think about, well, what's different in my room, it really all came down to the fact that I'm one of 24 people in the room this year. 23 of them have just as much say in our day as I do. I shouldn't say say, because I plan the schedule for the day. But as far as like who gets to talk when, anybody can talk at any point in time. They can use the Give Me 5 to make an announcement to everyone. If we're having a classroom discussion, we generally get to the point where they might raise their hands, but they're also going to do a mixture of shouting out at the appropriate times. And there's this back and forth. It's kind of this understanding. You don't cut people off, but at different times you might just shout out. And it's just a different atmosphere in that, my kids are doing things that teachers typically would be doing. And I don't know how to describe it other than I have like no restrictions. If my kids wanted to grade each other, they probably would start trying. You know what I mean? We're a grades-free classroom, so that's a bad example. But I mean, they might just be like, if Mr. Solarz does it, then we can do it. And they all have responsibilities. Some of them have assigned jobs, but these assigned jobs are shared by everyone. They just make sure that if it's assigned to them, that they make sure it gets done. but anybody can do it. So maybe in the morning, kids walk in, there are certain tasks that need to be done, just like checking in the morning for attendance and for lunch count and everything. And, I have kids whose job it is to make sure that everybody checks in, and then they do their own check-in. That's pretty standard practice. But, there's a setup of the morning announcements. There's a video announcements. They take care of all that. Depending on the schedule, they'll either get the computer cart. They might move the desks and the furniture and the tables around in our room. We have a fairly traditional furniture style room. We have desks, but they're in pods, and we have trapezoid tables, which are in the center. And kids don't have assigned seats, so they're free to flow. We've got definite tables around the outer edges and trapezoids in the middle. And depending on what we're doing, they might move the trapezoids. They might sit at some of the tables. They might sit around at the desks. But they make all these calls themselves. And if it looks like people aren't sure what to do, they'll say, give me five, give me five. Don't forget to get a computer and open up to Weebly and make your new blog post or whatever. And they're getting started. And this is all before the bell is rung. So we're ready to go when the announcements are over. We're just in limbo until those announcements are done. And then as soon as that happens, they're keeping an eye on the clock so that I'm not going to have to watch the clock. So if 45 minutes goes by and it's time to go to math, and we all spread out for math, they're going to say, give me five, it's time to transition for math. And that's going to cut me off. And I like that. And I say, if I want more time, I'll say, hold on, time out, I need 3 more minutes. And they'll be like, okay, great. But I'll always tell them, thank you for keeping me on time. And then, if it's time to walk to gym, we have to walk through the hallways. So they do a give me five, and they remind ourselves of the hallway behavior. They'll say, you guys remember in our school, we have to stay to the right, whispers or silence, and begin with the end in mind, know where we're headed. And they're just doing a lot of the leadership things that a teacher would typically do. And I don't need to remind them at this stage, at least in the year, which is the greatest point. Most of that, within the first month takes care of itself.
Yeah. I think you just said begin with the end in the mind, end in mind. That kind of sounds like a Stephen Covey thing. Are you guys one of those Leader in Me schools?
We're a Leader in Me school, yeah. So
I can pick that language out pretty quickly. Yeah, that's awesome. And one of the things that I've heard you mention a couple times here, and I know this was one of the things that really drew my attention when I read your book, was the idea of the Give Me Five. So I was wondering if, briefly you could tell us a little bit about it and why you thought it was important. And then also, we hear of teachers every once in a while that might say or think, man, that sounds like an awful lot of chaos and sort of instability if you do that. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what it is and how you came to it, and then also just address that whole chaos issue.
Sure. Well, 18 years ago when I started teaching, I'm guessing, and I don't know this at all, this is just my belief, I was probably reading one of those mailbox magazines or one of those, like an old-fashioned magazine of some sort as a new teacher, and it said, use Give Me Five to call out to get your class's attention. And I said, oh, that's great. So I brought it to my class. I made a little poster with a hand on it, and I think it suggested what the 5 things would be. So it's like eyes on me, ears on me, mouths closed, body facing me, listening to each other, whatever. I don't remember the 5, but I made a poster with Give Me Five, and it's up there. And then I used it for a good year or two, not realizing that, hey, I use it, it gets the class's attention. Why shouldn't I let the kids use it and let them get their attention as well? The whole point is we should be working together on this. It shouldn't be me always in charge. I mean, they have reasons to be in charge too. So at some point along the way, I said, guys, why don't you try Give Me Five when you think there's something really important to do? And it wouldn't be like in the middle of a lecture. If I'm standing up there lecturing, they're probably not likely to use Give Me Five very often. It's more often when I get my kids working collaboratively in partnerships or in groups, and they're all spread out, and somebody realizes that there's a great resource that they found online, and they want everybody to know where it is. So give me five, I'm putting this URL up on the board for you to use, or give me five, on page 16 of not the textbook, but of our, our little magazine that we have. We don't use textbooks either.
There you go. There you go.
Of our magazine that we're in, make sure you look at paragraph 3, whatever it is that they're using. They might give resources to each other, or they might say, give me five. Mr. Solarz just taught us how to add a embed code to our website. If anybody wants to learn how to do that, come over to our table and we'll teach you, or whatever. There's all these reasons why they use Give Me Five, but it's not typically during a lecture, which I don't lecture a ton. I have a tendency to lecture for maybe a half of the period or less, and then get out of their way so that they're doing some sort of active learning activity of some sort, either project-based learning or simulations, or, I mean, sometimes it's boring. I mean, I don't have many worksheets, to be honest with you, but we do things online that aren't always super exciting, but they're good practice, or they're whatever. So I like to get them working, though, and not just listening to me the whole time. So they probably won't interrupt me that often unless I've gone over and it's time to do something else. But Give Me Five's just a way that when one kid thinks of something that needs to be done, they can share it with the rest of the group.
Yeah, and regarding that, real quick before we switch off to the next point, doesn't I think of my my involvement in various jobs, growing up and getting into adulthood before I went into education, and even in education, I think of how often real life is like that, where it's not that you have a big group of people and they're all forced to sit in silence because you don't want to interrupt everybody. It is a little bit of that organized chaos. And sometimes one person needs to get the attention of the group to get everybody going in the right direction. It sounds like this is just a natural outgrowth of that real life skill.
Exactly. It just feels like what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be this team that has tasks that we have to accomplish. And every day my tasks might change. Sometimes tasks take a few days, but in general, we're all working at the same task. And I think the big realization for me was this idea that in the past, it was always about grading, and it was always about specific assessment. And we had to know what each kid knew exactly for every point. And it was never really about the learning. And it was never not about the learning, but it was more about making sure you figured out what every kid knew to a T. So the more they collaborated, the less you knew what that kid knew, because it could have been what their partner knew. And it was this whole thing of merging and muddying the waters, I guess I would say. And I said, I'm tired of worrying so much about what every kid knows for every little task. I'd rather have multiple opportunities to learn the skill or the concept. And sometimes that means I present it, they learn it on their own, and they work as a partnership to practice it. Sometimes those multiple options of working together with others is going to be that one thing that triggers the actual learning. So yeah, maybe I won't know if student A really didn't understand that concept because they worked with student B to get it right, on their activity. But what I do know is they got it right, and that's a better step than if they got it wrong and I never went back to it, which was historically more true. Like I would have them do work alone, have an activity, they would be marked wrong on something. I would move on most often. I wasn't the best teacher that constantly came back and said, oh, you didn't get this, let's go back to it. In a standards-based learning environment, you might go back to it more often. But 18 years ago, I had a curriculum, I needed to cover everything, and you just moved on. So I figured this is an opportunity for kids to learn. If they didn't learn it from me the first exposure or their second exposure, they're learning it with others their third exposure. Right. And it may muddy the waters. I may not be able to report exact progress for every kid, but right. I know I see learning, and I have evidence to support that they at least knew it in that moment with their partner. Yeah.
And that goes back to, I love the analogy of muddying the waters. I know exactly what you're talking about, because if like the water and the mud is all separated and you have the kids separated, you know exactly what everybody knows. But if you mix them all together, it gets real muddy. But so often everything that we do in our lives, I mean, from work to our relationships with our family and our friends and everything, every one of those interactions is so muddied. So I really like that, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I did ask you earlier and wanted to bring back the idea of the of the perceived idea of this being kind of like chaos. And I wondered if early on in the year, if it does kind of feel like chaos, and maybe kind of how you guys work through that and get to a productive end on that.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people ask about this. This is a pretty common question. Chaos. I don't want it. A lot of people don't like to say it, but I want control. I want it to follow a smooth.
Right. Yeah.
And we don't always say it out loud, but that's what we want. And I agree. I'm a type A personality. I want things done a certain way, and my kids know which way I want it done. I let them know, but it's just so happens to be a way that involves them, but really the way I think of it is I don't ever really feel like there's chaos, but I do know that when everything is not working in a regular classroom, all the pressure falls onto the teacher, and the teacher feels like like nobody's doing anything right. and at first you might blame the kids. You might be like, oh, this class is terrible, or oh, these 3 kids, they'll never make it work for us. And like maybe there's a lot of blame first, but then eventually if you really reflect on it, you realize you could have done things to have prevented those sorts of things if you were the perfect super teacher, which none of us are, So I don't want to have to be the perfect super teacher all the time. I'm relying on 23 others to help maintain order and control in our classroom, and they do a far better job of it than I could do. Compared, like I can't clone myself, so I can't be at every little partnership or every little spot in the room redirecting, but yet my kids can redirect in a leadership positive sort of way, rather than like an annoying first grader who whines and says, do it this way, you're doing it, none of that. We're learning, how to be leaders. And at first we might have to say, Mr. Solarz told me I have to tell you, that we're off task, so we need to get back on task or whatever. But eventually they lose the whole blame Mr. Solarz thing and just say, you guys, we're off task, let's get back on it. And the redirection is such a big deal, that comes with this leadership style. And you almost don't even have to teach them to say it. You just have to say, you guys, I need your help. I'm going to do everything I can to make our classroom environment a fun one and a great place to learn and an enjoyable year. But I need you to help. I need you to be part of that process. You need to look out for each other. I'm going to put you into partnerships, whether you're working together or responsibility partnerships. Even if you're working alone, you'll be looking out for this other person. And the goal will always be, to help our classroom run smoothly and to help each other learn throughout our day. And if anybody's ever off, doing something distracting or being distracted or being inappropriate or whatever, do your best to be a good friend and just help them get back on track. If you have to listen to them for 30 seconds, spout off about something dumb, listen to them for 30 seconds, but then say, okay, I heard you, great, now let's do this, instead, or let's get back to work. And that kind of mindset really works well with my 5th graders. I don't know how it'll work for everybody else's students, but that really works well for my 5th graders, the idea that they listen to each other. And that first week or two, it's not chaos at all. It's almost entirely teacher-led. So the kids are kind of in shock. They're kind of deer in headlights going, I think he might want me to do something right now, but I don't know exactly what it is. Or I might know what it is, but I'm not going to be the first to do that, and
because it's so different than what they've always done before, right?
Exactly. So the first 2 weeks, they're in a bit of a shock. And so I have to do a lot of scaffolding in that. I might start a lesson by saying, here's something I want to see during today's lesson. I'd like to see kids helping other kids by looking on their computer screens. It's not cheating in our classroom to look at other people's computers, because I don't care if you have the exact same stuff as the other person. We're creating in our classroom. We're not filling out worksheets. We're not there's not an answer key. It's not how it works. So if you're looking at another person's computer screen, I'm assuming you're either getting help by checking out where they're at, and seeing, oh, that's what we're supposed to be doing, or you're seeing if they're doing what they need to be. And if they're not, you just give them a bit of advice like, oh, we're actually supposed to be right over there now, and give them that advice that they need to help the class run smoothly. So I might scaffold a lesson by telling them I'm looking for that today, or I'm looking for a give me 5. And then if nobody's doing it right away, I might go right up to some of my braver kids that I think might be brave and say, in 3 minutes, it's going to be time for us to put away computers and get ready for gym. Would you please do a give me 5 and just say, give me 5, give me 5. It's time to transition to gym. Let's put away our computers. And by doing that, most kids will say, sure, and they're honored. 1 or 2 kids will be like, oh, please don't make me. And I'll be like, that's fine. I'll go to another kid for now. It's not a big deal. But, I hope you'll become, confident enough to do it eventually. And honestly, once you get the ball rolling with maybe 3, 4 kids, so it's not the same kid every time, other kids jump in and they want to do it. And so it never gets to chaos. However, you'll always have 1 or 2 kids who will be goofy with it, and so that's one of the things I try to say ahead of time is, here's some ways that kids have been goofy with Give Me 5 before. I don't really love these ways, so I might actually try to prevent that error from happening. That's one of the times that I don't necessarily want to relive. Like I had a sub one day, 10 years ago, and she said this kid kept saying, give me 4, and he wouldn't stop, and he was goofy, and he was just being silly, but every kid was like rolling their eyes, and I'm like, okay, so let's not do that. You're mocking me when you do that. Please try not to tease me. I'm your teacher. I care about you. Let's not make fun of your teacher, and just by building those relationships and telling them what to avoid, most kids are pretty good at not doing that. And once in a while, you might have to tell a kid, the way you did it wasn't appropriate. Can I please trust that you're going to use it appropriately?
Yeah.
And they do.
Yeah. And those are some of those lessons that I think kids, elementary kids, but I mean all the way through. I think that's another one of the roles of school, is to teach kids what's appropriate and inappropriate in their interactions, and help them to learn to be better social beings, I suppose. So
For sure.
yeah. Okay. So we've already gotten some really good practical stuff. We dug into the Gimme Five. We've talked about some of the jobs that kids can have, and just a variety of things. But I'd like us to dig into, to get real practical here. And I was wondering if you could come up with, maybe a handful of things that, if we've got a teacher out there that's going, I'd really like to do this. I'm trying to figure out where to start. Maybe you've got an idea of some things that lots of teachers could do, or maybe some crucial first things that they need to do at the beginning. What are some practical things that people can start doing now to push themselves in that direction of getting to be more student-led?
Sure. So the reasons why a student-led classroom might not work is if kids don't learn to respect each other. So for me, I don't know who I'm getting necessarily at the beginning of the year. I'm getting 25 new students every year. I don't know if they like each other, if they don't like each other. I don't know what their histories have been. So what I need to do right at the very beginning of the year, besides building relationships between myself and them, is I need to build the relationships between each other, between them. So I don't do just the simple mixers. We're going to be planning collaborative activities all day, every day, pretty much for the first couple weeks at least, so that they're constantly working with each other. And I won't let them pick their partners. And I'm a classroom of choice. Like we do, you could sit anywhere you want. You can do a million things for passion time, for, that's our genius hour. You get choice all the time in our classroom, but I won't let you choose your partner when it comes to working on academic things, because I need every kid in my classroom to work with every other kid in the classroom so that they build a relationship, especially if they've ever had a bad time together in the past. Maybe, I remember in second grade, he was mean to me, or, those things linger, especially if, they were maybe separated in third grade because the teachers said they don't get along. And then by fourth grade, maybe they were put back together accidentally or not. Either way, you've got histories. And so I get them working together. But of course, if you just do that, then you're just going to expose all the problems, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but, they're going to start to show that they're fighting and they don't like each other. So I don't do just that. I also start with what I think is the most important classroom meeting that I offer, which is called Marble Theory. And Marble Theory, we sit down on the floor, and I say to my kids, I go, you guys, I have a belief that I truly believe in. Like it's not from a book. It's not from, I didn't just see it on a cartoon or anything like that. This is something I believe, but it's a bit of a metaphor. So I'm gonna tell you the story, and it's a metaphor for the way I believe we are intelligence-wise. And so I sit them all down, and we're chatting together, and I say, I believe that all of us are born with the exact same number of marbles in our brain. And I'll say that the number is 1 billion. Let's just pick a number, an arbitrary number. So 1 billion marbles. All right. Now those marbles are all in a big, huge, bowl of marbles. And inside our head are not just that bowl of marbles, but also thousands upon thousands of little Dixie cups that can hold those marbles. And I have a big box of marbles and Dixie cups. So I show them the props, and I get them all clear on that. And I say, now each of these marbles represents your ability to do something. Maybe it's probably more skill related, but like, let's say, the ability to ride a bike. So I grab a cup and I say, so this cup represents my ability to ride a bike. Now it may not include my ability to get off of a bike safely, but to pedal, here's the cup for pedaling a bike and staying upright. I might need another cup for getting off safely. So I have my 2 cups for riding a bike. And I said, when I'm born, I bet you the cup for riding a bike is pretty empty, and I show them an empty cup. Some of us, though, are born with a little bit of natural ability where it comes a little bit easy to some people, and they get on the bike and they ride a little bit easier than someone else. So maybe they have a couple marbles at the beginning, and some of us don't. But as soon as we start learning, maybe we have, our mom or dad helps take us out and teaches us how to ride a bike, and we start to learn, or we just get up on that bike and learn over and over and over on our own. But either way, we're adding marbles from this big, vast supply of marbles into our riding a bike cup. And eventually our riding a bike cup is pretty full. You're not going to just fall off your bike unless you hit a crack or something. You're pretty secure. That doesn't mean, although this is a bad example, you could lose marbles, but they say riding a bike, you never lose your marbles, right? So maybe that's a bad example. I've never used this one with kids, but you know, they say it's like riding a bike, but I say you can lose marbles, you know, if you don't practice it. So yeah, bad example. But either way, you know, you've got these marbles in this cup, and now because you practiced it, you have more marbles than someone who maybe hasn't practiced it. But does that make you more intelligent than someone who's not practiced it before, or are you just more skilled due to the practice? And we talk about that a little, and I go, so I want you guys to think about intelligence, and I think of these marbles as the keys to what we call intelligence. I said, in school, we've determined that people who put their marbles in their reading, writing, science, social studies, spelling, math, in those cups, we've determined that those kids are the ones who are smart because they have the most marbles in all the academic cups. And it's not like one reading cup, it's like 50 different types of reading skills and math skills and writing skills, because we can be bad at one or another and be good at others. But we've determined in school that you're intelligent and smart if you have a lot of marbles in the academic cups. But yet someone who's really good at playing the cello, or who can you know, like go to a group gathering and get all the kids together to play a game of baseball, or those who can like score a goal in soccer using a bicycle kick or whatever, like all these things, we don't in school say that shows intelligence, but you might be allocating your marbles into these other cups that represent important skills in your family or in your, you know, your own personal interests. And at no point in time does someone in school say, boy, are you intelligent? You can do a bicycle kick. You know, they say you're a great athlete, but that's not the same. So I said, in our classroom, I really want us to think about what intelligence really is. Why do we have to use these arbitrary beliefs of reading, writing, science, social studies, math, and spelling as what makes us smart? Why can't we all just be equally smart, but in different ways? You know, like I maybe wasn't smart in certain areas. You know, I didn't love to read as a child. So some people would say, you're not very smart, Mr. Solarz, you didn't read very much. But yet I was a good speller. So someone who knew me as a speller might have said, boy, are you intelligent? You know, everybody's going to look at you differently. But if they looked at my ability to do a bicycle kick in soccer, I wouldn't have even come close. I would have tripped over myself and fallen forward. And so somebody might have said, you know, you're not much of an athlete. But I don't want to, I want people to realize that those marbles can be distributed in academic cups or in sports or whatever. And we all have the same amount. So it's just about distributing them in the cups that you want to distribute them in. So in our class, you know, like if you were a straight A student, I want you to understand that you bring some academic gifts to our class, and we're thankful for that. But we shouldn't neglect people who got straight C's on their report card, because they bring other gifts to our group, and we need to find out, where did they allocate their marbles? Where are their marbles at? We need to know, because we need to use everybody effectively in our classroom, and we need to respect each other. And honestly, when this is like a half-hour lesson, so I gave you the 3-minute, 4-minute version, but when we get done with this, I have had my gifted students, not purposely, but within days, going up to my kids with severe LD and asking them for help. And never in my career have I ever seen that before. They would go to other kids who were gifted and ask them for help, even if it meant climbing over 14 children to get to that one kid, because that's all they thought would be able to help them. But they realized that, you know, this child here who's not gotten great grades is really talented in computers, and guess what? We're on a computer right now. I bet you he'll be able to explain to me how to fix this problem. You know, and when you see that, you know you've done something right for the classroom community. You realize, boy, my kids are finally looking at each other differently. They're respecting each other. You know, and it doesn't happen overnight, and not everybody does it right away. I'll be honest, my class is not that way yet. We had some problems just last week between some, but the way I responded and the way we're working through it, I know we're going to get there with them, because it's important. And I just reminded them, you know, like, we're so different. We need to respect each other, and we need to start to learn how to get along a little bit with each other. So
yeah,
it's a process.
I love that. And I mean, I'm just envisioning with this, that this is kind of like the foundation of a house. Like, all of this stuff has to be laid in place. And honestly, when I threw that question out to you, I kind of thought we would talk about, you know, specific like activities or specific routines or something in the classroom, but you got real foundational. And I think that's so important. We talked about, you know, respecting each other and understanding each other's unique needs. And my goodness, that marble analogy, you have no idea how much I love that marble analogy already. And it kind of brought to my mind, like, it's almost like your class is kind of like a Swiss Army knife. You know, there are all of these tools that do different things, and by utilizing everybody's unique tools, you're able to do more. And I think that's a wonderful lesson to be able to pull that in. So that's great.
So the short answer though is do marble theory, get them working collaboratively, give me 5 power right away, all that up front right at the beginning. Tell them to take risks, and that you want them to make decisions without your permission constantly, and that you'll give feedback. So you gotta remind them, because you're doing it without permission, I'm going to occasionally tell you it wasn't a good idea, but you have to understand that I'm thankful that you took the risk, but I just don't want you to do it again. You know, and that's generally, you know, that works, and you can remind them of being safe, you know, and make safe decisions and be wise and smart and figure out what you think is best, but don't be afraid to try new things, because in our classroom, you get to make decisions freely. And when you do all that at the very beginning of the year, and you promote it every day, and you remind them every day, and you thank them for all the risks they take, and when you're telling them they did something wrong, you just say, I'm so sorry, we can't do that, stop, but thank you for taking that risk, I'm really proud of you. Something happens, and it starts to snowball, and then eventually the class does really run itself. And I've been out probably 14 or 15 days already this year. I was on jury duty for 9 days. You know, and my class kind of ran itself. Now we had 1 or 2 or 3 rougher days, but honestly, like, they were some of the best days of you know, having a sub over the years too. The subs have said things like, your class just runs itself, I didn't really need to be there. You know, those kids know what they're doing. They don't always listen to each other. They, you know, sometimes they're getting a little confident and, you know, wanting to do it on their own, but they were focused and working hard pretty much the whole day. So that should probably be one of the main goals.
Yeah. My goodness. I think just in those last 2 minutes or so, that may have been some of the most value-packed stuff that you may end up giving us on this whole thing. If somebody's watching this and you want to rewind that back for like 2 minutes or so, I mean, we hit risk-taking, and we hit, I mean, there's so much right there. I think that was probably that was our take-home spot right there.
Well, thanks.
Now, something else that you touched on, maybe we can kind of use this to start to wrap up a little bit. And actually, this is a good place to wrap up. I wanted to touch on, you said that you're a gradeless class, or you do grades differently. And obviously, since that's kind of the end of the, sort of a cycle of learning, maybe this is a good place to wrap up. What does that look like, and how does that benefit this whole idea of the student-led class, do you think?
That's a great question. So this is where some people lose me. So if you're going to turn off the podcast now, please don't. You don't have to be a gradeless classroom to make any of this work. The reason I did it is because, and I'll explain what my gradeless classroom really is in a moment. But the main reason I did it is because I discovered that kids who are, if you're giving back assignments and they're always getting A's on their assignments or whatever, they start to realize that they can put in less and less effort and still continue to do very well. And they seem to get less out of their day than the other kids who, if they had maybe, a grade that was right in the middle of where they thought it was, maybe they wanted to keep trying harder and harder to get a better grade. Maybe they were motivated, but those kids who already got the A were less motivated. And the kids who got a grade lower than what they thought they deserved were more likely to either complain or give up, or I had parent concerns and all this. It's just grades caused so much trauma, and all for very silly reasons, because a lot of times they never took that grade, and if it was low, tried to necessarily learn what they didn't know, or if it was high, tried to figure out, what can I do to go beyond what I already know. It wasn't a lot of that. It was more a lot of disagreement and a lot of, well, because of this grade, this is how I now feel. And I said, that wasn't what I wanted. I still have to give a report card. So a lot of this is going to be hard to understand, or it's going to be hard for me to explain at least. But in reality, every activity I do, nothing ever gets a grade to the students, but I can put all of those grades, if I wanted to, into my grade book for me. I'm not in a school where I have to share grades with parents right away. We don't have, where you have to have 3 grades a week or anything like that. So in that regard, I'm extremely lucky. But what I do is I grade more holistically, but not against standards-based grading. I actually have been, without standards, I have been breaking down my report card for many, many years. Whereas, I might take like a reading, I do math, reading, writing, science, social studies for all my kids. So I might take reading and I might break it down into comprehension and fluency. I might do, we do like a lit circle in our class where kids do novel studies, but it's all in class. So I might do like the discussions they come up with in reading. I might break it down into these categories. And based on all of the evidence that I collect over time, I'm able to give a score for each of those breakdowns. And then I do give a whole grade for reading, which is not standards-based, but that's how our report cards report out. So they might get a B in reading, but they can see comprehension was an A, fluency was a B, their discussions were a C. So you'd want, and then in my comments, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 or 4 sentences explaining what their current discussions are like and how they can improve, and that kind of thing. But to give them a grade every time isn't going to help them grow necessarily, because I believe in the feedback. So this is the first time I've mentioned feedback, and half the book talks about feedback. It's the idea that every time kids are doing anything, I'm processing what they're doing and trying to figure out a way of making it better. So today I'm sitting in my classroom, my kids are reading 9 different novels around me, and I'm listening into every discussion, and I'm focusing. I don't know what's going on half the time, but I know where the that group over there just said, I think we need to do it this way. And so it triggered my mind. I walked over there. I said, what'd you guys just decide? And they're like, well, we just decided, and they told me something. And I go, oh, no, stop, don't do that. Thank you for deciding that on your own. I'm so proud of you for making that decision. I really want you to do it this way for me. Here's why. And they're like, oh, that makes sense. And then they went back to doing it that way. Went back to a spot in the middle of the room, listened in, saw a group doing something else, and gave them feedback. The whole idea is I'm responding with feedback, but I'm not typing in my grade book all these grades for everybody, but I am trying to see who's leading, who's following, who's building on other people's ideas. And I'm trying to give feedback so that we can continue to grow. And then I give whole class feedback too. So that was a small group feedback, but I might just do a give me 5, give me 5. I noticed that a lot of us are doing blank. Here's what I need you to be doing instead, or whatever. And so just this feedback loop where we're constantly trying to improve helps. And then because it's a collaborative atmosphere, I only need to say it once, and then typically the next time somebody starts to do that thing wrong again, somebody else will be like, oh no, Mr. Solarz said he wants it to be done this way, because they know to correct each other, and nobody takes offense by it, because they've been told, we're all extensions of Mr. Solarz in a way. We're all teachers in our classroom, we're all learners in our classroom, so everybody can help everybody. So that idea of feedback is so important that a grade is unnecessary. Now, the one thing people might say is, are there surprises on the report card? And I don't feel that there probably are too often. Kids who are getting a C in reading have probably gotten a C before in reading. I don't look at the old report cards, but I'm guessing that if they're getting a lower grade, that it's probably more common for them than before, because I'm assessing their comprehension, I'm assessing their fluency, I'm assessing things that other teachers would have assessed, and then I'm adding other things in that I feel are valid and important. But yeah. I do have to keep track of, if somebody's getting a D or an F, I have to make sure that I've talked to a parent at some point before a report card goes home and give them the heads up and give them the ways that their child could try to improve their grade. But luckily, K-5, we're more of an improvement focus at our level. Grades aren't the end-all, be-all. We understand it's a process, and kids have to know the foundation before they can go further. So it's working for me. It's more complicated than all that, but that's the gist of it. And next year we're going to standards-based grading for our whole district, so I'll have to adjust, so that it's a little bit more clear for each standard. But it does work, and it prevents a lot of that giving up and that I'm okay without trying harder kind of attitudes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we've talked about all of these ideas tonight. I think that could help someone head in this direction. And that's one of the things that I love about this book, is that this is a full book, and it's got a ton of ideas. And I remember you mentioned something about lit circles. I remember just today, as I was flipping through it, stumbling upon the part where it talks about lit circles. And there's just all of these practical things that you can come up with. And the great thing about it is, let's see if I can, there's one right there, it's got all these QR codes in it too, so that you can jump off, and it's not just what's held between the covers of this book. You've got a lot more. So this, I think this is a great resource, and I hope if someone is interested in digging into the idea of a more student-led classroom, that maybe they'll check it out. Is there anything else regarding the book that you want people to know? Do you want to give them your quick elevator pitch about it, or anything like that?
Well, you know, I believe strongly that if you empower your students to lead and collaborate in the classroom, they become lifelong learners. They become people who can transfer their skills to new situations. You know, when we're constantly telling them what to do and how to do it, that's fine in the moment. But when you actually immerse them into like true learning, they have to figure it out themselves, and they start to apply those skills that maybe you practiced early on. So I hope that you'll consider it. You know, some people are worried about it's another thing, or what if it fails? And I always say, you know, if you're not able to create a student-led atmosphere, you've just got a teacher-led atmosphere, which is what you would have had anyways. So there's nothing wrong with that. You know, maybe you'll go inch by inch into getting more student-led each year. I would imagine over my 18 years, I wasn't as student-led at the beginning, and I'm more student-led now. So I'm sure that it's a continuum, but give it a try. Your kids feel like they have more to provide the classroom. They have a voice. It's more meaningful. They come back and visit and say how powerful it is. And they say, yeah, 6th grade or 7th grade maybe isn't as student-led, but they know how to advocate for themselves, and they know, you know, those skills aren't going anywhere. They know how to do those things when it's going to be called on again. So, you know, give it a try. It's really, it makes for a fun atmosphere where there's 24 of us just learning together, and I don't feel like I'm always on stage. You know,
yeah, exactly. And the other thing that's great about this is that if you do struggle, or if you have questions or whatever, that there's also places that you can go for that. I mean, I'm going to ask you in just a second to give us some places where we can find you, but I know one really good place to use as support is the LearnLab community that has kind of popped up on Twitter. So maybe you can tell us just real briefly, if someone wants to get in touch with you or find more of your stuff or get in touch with this community, what's the best way to do all that?
Absolutely. So hashtag LearnLab is a great place. I check it pretty much daily. I know others do as well. That's one place. You can tweet me at Paul Solarz. You can go ahead and email me, psolarz@sd25.org. So it's schooldistrict25.org. That's a great way. You can go to learnlikeapirate.com. All of the QR codes are on there through links organized by the 6, the acronym PIRATE, you know, organized by peer collaboration, improvement, focused learning, responsibility, active learning, 21st century skills and empowerment. You can find articles and blog posts over the years that relate to each of those letters. Those are probably the easiest ways to get a hold of me. You can also see at the bottom of learnlikeapirate.com, go to the very bottom, our classroom website is there. So this year it's paulsolarz.weebly.com. The last few years it's been psolarz.weebly.com. So you have all my kids' e-portfolio work, anything that we've done in class. My kids, we take photos every day, all day, and upload that so you can see what we're doing in the classroom. Videos, our YouTube channel's on there. Over 1,000 videos are made every year of the kids. So cool stuff. So it's all online. We have permission to share with everybody in the world. So use it. You know, check it out. Find out what works for you and ask questions. Happy to always help.
Wow, that's awesome. So if anybody's interested in doing this and is looking for resources, there is no excuse now. We've got all sorts of stuff here. So Paul, this has been amazing. So much good has come out of this interview. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much. And thanks to you for watching and for joining us in the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.